I'll sum it up. The way I really felt, I went to Australia in 1957, and I went along with the Platters, Big Joe Turney, Bill Haley, and Freddie Bell and the Bell Boys. And this was my first big trip. So what I did was, to let her know how I really felt, I sent her my insurance policy.
I have to thank Andrew Hickey for the research for this week, because episode 27 of A History of Rock Music in 500 Songs is the very song I rolled last week.
Episode 27, Tweedledee by LaVern Baker.
For real, you guys, his podcast might be one of the finest things on planet Earth right now. So with all thanks to Andrew Hickey's amazing basso profundo voice from the English North Country, here are the 5 things for LaVern Baker. She was born Dolores Evans, but LaVern Baker isn't exactly a made-up stage name, because her middle name is LaVern and her dad's last name was Baker. Though in the 40s, she did perform under the name Little Miss Sharecropper. Really? Yeah, afraid so. She hated performing under that name, but there was a hugely popular singer at the time named Little Miss Cornshucks. And Baker was basically doing a tribute act. She was born in Chicago, but moved to Detroit in her 20s to further her singing career. Now, one cool thing about her time in Detroit is that she made friends with this singer from Oregon that came in to try and hone his blues chops. She ended up giving him a bunch of lessons, and he went on to be a really amazingly big kind of teen idol. His name was Johnny Ray. Broke 1 million hearts in mono? That Johnny Ray? That's the guy. Anyway, she got a deal with OK Records in 1951 and started using the name B. Baker. And you know, up till now, I always thought that OK meant to be perhaps a regional pronunciation of OK, but that's not it. The guy that founded the company was a German expat, Otto Karl Erich Heinemann, OKEH. 2 years later, in 1953, she was signed by Atlantic and started performing as LaVern Baker. Her first single for Atlantic was one she co-wrote, Soul on Fire. It only did okay, but Atlantic saw the potential in her and brought her back to record another single. That second single was the song I rolled to get here, Tweedledee. It was written by Winfield Scott, a member of the Atlantic house band, The Q's, although they used different names depending on who they were recording with. With LaVern Baker, they were the Gliders. With Ruth Brown, they were the Rhythmakers. With Big Joe Turner, they were the Blues Kings. You get the picture. Tweedledee was one of a number of Latin-sounding songs with nonsense lyrics, kind of a thing at the time, thanks to an R&B hit from the previous year recorded by Gene and Eunice called Kokomo, parentheses, I Love You So, close parentheses. And that kind of brings me to the next point. In 1955, the practice of recording note-for-note sound-alike recordings of pop songs was everywhere. It was so prevalent, in fact, that on the Billboard charts after the song name, they would list all the different people who recorded that song whose records were selling that week. For the second week of May 1955, for example, the listing for Tweedledee on the Billboard charts lists not only LaVern Baker, but also Bopaloos, Teresa Brewer, Dorothy Collins, the Lancers, Pee Wee King, Bonnie Lou, Al Sears, Vicki Young, but the best-selling version was recorded by Georgia Gibbs. And it wasn't just a couple songs that got this treatment. Every single song on the top 10 for the week that I just rolled had multiple versions listed. This was just the way music business operated in 1955. And this wasn't the first time Georgia Gibbs had done something like this. See, she was a relatively popular singer from the big band era. If I Knew You Were Coming, I'd Have Baked a Cake, that's her. But once the industry started shifting away from big bands and towards this new rock and roll thing, her record company kind of forced her into becoming another Pat Boone, re-recording hits made popular by black artists. In fact, the same pop chart that I looked at where Tweedledee was number 7, the number 4 song is Dance With Me, Henry, top recording by Georgia Gibbs.
You gotta dance with me, Henry.
All right, baby.
Only it's a note-for-note re-recording of The Wallflower, recorded by Etta James.
You got to roll with me, Henry.
All right, baby.
Now here's where we get to start talking about what a badass LaVern Baker was, because she sued Georgia Gibbs and her record company for $250,000 for copyright infringement. And even though she didn't win that case, in the end, she kind of got the last laugh. Shortly after the suit was concluded, she had recorded another nonsense novelty song in the style of Kokomo called Tra-La-La, which Georgia Gibbs, again, re-recorded. But the thing is, the song that made LaVern Baker's single sell so well was on the other side, Jim Dandy. And Georgia Gibbs didn't understand what this new Jim Dandy music was. It was a lot rawer and a lot more intense. So for once, the Georgia Gibbs version didn't sell as well as the original, and shortly thereafter, the practice of recording sound-alike versions of popular songs started fading. And one final piece of badassery for LaVern Baker. In the late 60s, she did a USO's tour for the troops in Vietnam. And while she was there, she contracted pneumonia and was transported to Subic Bay Naval Base in the Philippines. Once she recovered, she was asked to perform at the NCO club on base. And she did. And then she was asked to stay. She did. And she ended up living in the Philippines, managing the base's club for 22 years, mentoring hundreds of Filipino musicians along the way. And if you know anything about musicians from the Philippines, you know that they're seen as perhaps the best cover band musicians anywhere. The Philippines has a huge music culture. And that's the 5 things for LaVern Baker. So I'm off to give her self-titled album a spin. I'll be back soon with my first impressions.
The weather is bad. You have no place to go. So stay here at the fabulous Staff NCO.
And they had a disc jockey somewhere, I think it was in San Francisco. He said, I give $5 to anybody know where LaVern Baker is. And the guy said, hey, I just left her. She's in the Philippines.
Y'all, LaVern Baker can sing. LaVern Baker is a blues and gospel belter. The single wildest thing about this first spin is the juxtaposition of that voice against those songs. Hearing that voice singing things like Tweedledee, Bop Ting-a-Ling, or Tra-La-La, it's like hearing Mahalia Jackson singing Alley Oop or Mersey Dotes or something. You're right, but she does it. And with full commitment. She sang Rang Dang Doozy, You Got Me Woozy with every bit of the seriousness with which she sings No More Heartbreaks, I Swear by All the Stars Above. There are a couple of straight eights rockers on this collection, Jim Dandy and That's All I Need.
Jim Dandy to the rescue. Go, Jim Dandy. That's all I need.
These are your heavy backbeat, early days of rock, oh my gosh, Ethel, can you believe the noise coming from the kid's bedroom kind of songs. The kind of music that made stars out of Elvis and Chuck Berry. Of the two, I gotta go with Jim Dandy. LaVern Baker brings an undeniable swagger to all of these tunes, but there's a little something extra on Jim Dandy. And of course, there are a couple of Latin-inspired novelty songs, Tra-La-La and Tweedledee, like we said before.
Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, tweedly, tweedly, tweedly-dee.
The arrangements on these two songs are nearly identical. In fact, when Georgia Gibbs recorded her version of Tweedledee, her record company went so far as to hire the same musicians and the same arranger that Atlantic used for LaVern Baker's version. They even tried to hire Tom Dowd to engineer, but he refused. These are fun little songs, but my word does LaVern Baker put her back into these. I promise you, you will never hear Tweedly Deedly Deedly Dot sung with more conviction. Both I Can't Love You Enough and Bop Ting-a-Ling are New Orleans-inspired piano-based grooves with tresillo bass lines. Tresillo is 2 dotted quarter notes followed by a quarter note. It's bum, 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 bum. Boom, 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 boom. That's tresillo.
I can't please you enough, no sorry. Bop ting-a-ling, you handsome thing.
And for pure vibes, these might be my favorite songs on the album. Still, it's kind of a mid-tempo swing/shuffle thing.
And still.
and both Soul on Fire and My Happiness Forever are in that gray area between mid-tempo triplet feel and slow 6/8.
But for me, you're the only one. Light a fire in the dark.
Still very much 50s pop, and My Happiness Forever is kind of a toned-down torch song. But my favorite of these is probably Soul on Fire. I mean, on one hand, it feels like a doo-wop song, but on the other hand, it has a rawness and a spontaneity, especially in the piano comping, that sets this one apart from the others for me. I could completely see this one killing in a live setting, especially with the breaks and the chorus. And while we're talking about the triplet feel thing, there are 3 tunes: Play It Fair,
Play the game. Play it fair.
Tomorrow Night,
Will all the thrill be gone?
and That Lucky Old Sun, parentheses, just rolls around heaven all day, close parentheses,
Work like the devil for my pain.
all with this same kind of feel, only a little more subdued. You know, it's interesting what a difference an arrangement can make, because both Play It Fair and My Happiness Forever have the same groove, same tempo even. But Play It Fair feels so much more like a ballad. Gotta be the backing vocals and the celeste, maybe. Of the 3 of these, I think I like That Lucky Old Sun, parentheses, just rolls around heaven all day, close parentheses, best, not just for the name, but also for the swagger coming from the little straight-eighths fills and from LaVern Baker's torch song delivery. And that just leaves Get Up, parentheses, you sleepy head, close parentheses, a mid-tempo swing with a decent syncopation and some really good whistling.
Get up, you sleepy head.
And how can you leave a man like this? A blues rocker with heaps of swagger, a real contender for my favorite song on the whole damn album.
First he'll love me, then he'll beat me.
Overall, I'm really liking this music. I mean, there have been plenty of times this season where I've come away saying, yeah, that's pretty cool. But with some of this LaVern Baker, I'm more like, well, hell yeah! I mean, the weirdness and repression of pop and rock from the mid-50s is all over these tunes, but man, does she sell these. Anyway, those are my first impressions. Back soon with my final thoughts.
Sort of cheated in a way because they...
Oh yes, but that's water over the bridge, baby. It's gone. You know, you can't cry over it. You just try to do better what you can now, and do better now than what you can do, because you know better now.
Okay, Chuck Berry's Story Songs, Little Richard's Intensity, Danny Cedrone's guitar solo on Rock Around the Clock. I think that pretty much is the sum total of rock from the 50s that I feel very strongly about. And thanks to things I've learned later in life, I'm no longer 100% sure about the Chuck Berry stuff. Right, but it's not like I don't like any music from the 50s. Some amazing stuff was getting made. In jazz, you've got Straight No Chaser, Blue Train, Desafinado.
Eu desafino amor.
In blues, Smokestack Lightning, 3 O'Clock Blues,
3 o'clock in the morning.
Hoochie Coochie Man. Even in 50s R&B, right as rock and roll was beginning to eat their lunch, you had What I Say, Cry Baby,
They call me Cry Baby.
Ain't Nobody's Business If I Do.
Ain't nobody's business.
But the 50s rock scene? Charming. I think that's the word I would use. First, nobody was sure if this was piano music like R&B or guitar music like hillbilly swing. Plus, there was gobs and gobs of snarly tenor sax, which kind of didn't survive the decade. And everything was just so squeaky clean. Even the rebellious stuff of the time got no harder than Shakin' All Over or Great Balls of Fire. Heck, you could argue that the most rebellious rock song of the 50s was Rumble. That didn't have any lyrics at all. But y'all, this LaVern Baker stuff is worth your time. I mean, the songwriting, for the most part, it's nothing special. It's not bad, but it's not, oh my gosh, either. It's every bit as Eisenhower-era repressed and sugar-coated as anything else from that time. But man, does LaVern Baker sell it. Even if she weren't a champion for the rights of black artists in an era where re-recordings by white artists were selling more. With Tweedledee, the tunes were literally identical, down to the same musicians and arrangers. But when LaVern Baker released hers, 14. But for Georgia Gibbs, 5. Even if she didn't have the amazing story of living for 22 years in the Philippines, running the naval club at Subic Bay, and only leaving when the Marcos regime was overthrown and a democratic government was installed. In short, even if LaVern Baker wasn't the absolute badass she was, I would still say you need to get yourself up on her music. So that just leaves my 5-word overview of LaVern Baker by LaVern Baker. My goodness, can she sing. Now let's see what I'll be listening to next. As always, we're first going to roll for the year. 1925. Okay, for these, we do not have weekly charts. So we're going to go use tsort.info and look for all of 1925. And we're going to have to roll for a position 1 through 100 for the year. So 1 through 100. Number 76. And looking at tsort.info for 1925, number 76 song for the year was Carl Fenton, Brown Eyes, Why Are You Blue?
I'm mostly balled up on this jazz age sounds, but this Carl Fenton seems the berries to me. His ditty, Brown Eyes, Why Are You Blue, was all of us in 25. Got itself a spot in the first platter of a 3-disc shebang, packed with the era's best hoofers, Elza.
Sorry. This collection is called, appropriately enough, Song Collection Volume 1. So that's what I will be listening to next. Thanks for hanging out with me, everyone. I'll see you next week.